Here it is. Okay. So, so this is worth 300 points. It's essentially a rhetorical analysis of a documentary, right? So you're going to pick a documentary. This should be between 1,500 and 2,500 words. Almost no one ever has any trouble achieving that on it. You're going to use a template just like the one you're using. So the template has like a, you know, the template already has like 600 words or something. Rough draft is due date 14. Okay. Oh, actually, never mind. You're using a different template this semester. So for the rough draft for day 14, that's worth 50 points. And 50 points is if you do the full rough draft, 25 points if you don't complete the rough draft. Okay. But the idea is I want you ready by then. I want you to have things by then. And you're turning in this, the essay on this based on your rough draft due what's called due the last day of class. Okay? So the idea here is that you're going to have a rough draft for the template and you're going to essentially put it into an essay format. Okay, okay, so here's the idea. Right? Many documentaries are made to persuade their audiences about some subject. Right? For example, SeaWorld mistreats their orcas and this needs to change. Climate change is happening and we got to do something about it now. Person X is sitting in jail for a crime he didn't commit and his case needs to be revisited. Right? So these are the kind of documentaries that try to persuade their audience about something. Insofar as the film's aim is to reach a conclusion and convince their audience of that conclusion, including maybe that the subject is complicated and maybe there is no simple or easy conclusions to reach about it, the film is largely meant to be an argument providing evidence to support the conclusion. Since persuasion involves not just logos, so not just argument, but also pathos and ethos, these are coming back here, right? These are almost always used as well. So documentaries like this typically do the following. So they give you evidence in the forms of facts, statistics, expert opinion, right? All that is logos. Right? Remember, logos is all reasoning. Then they argue either implicitly or explicitly that this evidence leads to a particular conclusion, right? That's reasoning, logos. They use experts and well-regarded sources to establish credibility and persuade their audience, right? So that's ethos. For the most part, right? They're trying to get you to trust them. They're trying to get you to think that they're credible by using experts. And they try to emotionally connect with the audience to make them care about the subject, right? To make them feel the importance of the subject. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to present a rhetorical analysis of a documentary on any topic of your choice with a focus on its central argument, right? Most documentaries don't try to persuade you of something specific, right? Nor do they have a central argument that tries to do this. So you got to choose, you got to make sure you have one before actually beginning this. So a lot of this is going to be, you got to make sure your documentary is the right kind of documentary, right? If you're not sure that it makes an argument, you should probably choose a different documentary to work on. So here's a bunch of examples. An Inconvenient Truth is the famous documentary by Al Gore about climate change, essentially that we got to do something about climate change now. Fahrenheit 9/11 is the most successful documentary of all time, where Michael Moore, Michael Moore essentially made it to try to make sure that George Bush wasn't reelected after the Iraq War. The Thin Blue Line is a famous Errol Morris documentary where he essentially, it was the first documentary that showed someone in prison that the film argued was innocent, and actually led to his release. Super Size Me argued that fast food is much worse for us than we think. Blackfish, I think all these are Oscar winners. Blackfish argued that, yeah, Brody.
Can I do it on Blackfish? Or is that not allowed?
No, because I'm going to use Blackfish as my examples for most things.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I use Blackfish as my examples, but think something like Blackfish, right? The Cove is similar to Blackfish in many ways. So The Cove is about Japanese practices of killing dolphins, right? If you've ever seen it, it's great.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Right? And then you got lots of documentaries that aren't argument focused, like Man on Wire, the story about the guy who walks between the Twin Towers, Grizzly Man, the Warner documentary about the dude who goes and tries to prove that you can live with grizzlies, doesn't end up well for him. The Fog of War, Hero Dreams of Sushi, Exit Through the Gift Shop, and any biographical documentary. So any documentary about like a single person, is probably not going to be appropriate. So if you can't find a documentary that you want to work on, here's a whole bunch of pre-approved suggestions. Okay? So you guys see this list here? Like anything on this list, you can do without getting my okay. Okay? These are already pre-approved. There we go. If you want to work on something that's not here, that's awesome. These are the two that you can't work on, Brody. So you picked one of the only two that you can't work on. Okay? But besides that, and Shu Wei, it doesn't need to be in English. It can be a Chinese documentary. It could be in any language.
Okay, thanks.
All right. But if you're going to use something that's not here, get my okay ahead of time. Okay? All right. The assignments will demonstrate your ability to do most things we've done in this course. Specifically, analyze relevant information to place an argument in appropriate context, analyze an argument structure and effectiveness, identify the various ways a work can attempt to persuade, and draw a clear distinction between logical and non-logical attempts. Provide proper evidence for your claims, evaluate expertise and credibility, identify rhetorical devices and logical fallacies, choose an appropriate organizational structure and style, and clearly articulate your ideas and connections with them. All right, audiences. This is the audience you're writing to, so not the film's audience. It's just kind of a reminder, this is you're writing an academic paper, right? It's an audience, your audience expects and enjoys an interesting, well-supported analysis of the documentary. I have here, be careful. A well-done documentary often manages to impress its viewers through pathos and ethos. So remember, pathos, it's trying to get you through emotion and trust instead of actually giving you reasons, while providing very little reasons to accept its claims. I've watched lots of documentaries where I'm convinced by the end of the film, only to reflect on the film later and realize the film only felt true, and in fact was full of bad reasoning. Okay? I've seen it again and again in this assignment where students in your position are persuaded by documentaries, but when I read that about the evidence that's presented, I'm stunned because it usually seems quite weak to me. Okay? It's easy to be emotionally manipulated and to be moved by your cognitive biases. So approach these documentaries as with anyone's claims with a healthy skepticism. Okay? Make sure they really do make their case and actively look for the flaws and limitations of their arguments. So a lot of documentary filmmakers are really good at making you feel like they just made a great case. But that doesn't mean they really just made a great case. Okay? So be skeptical, look to see if they really actually argue their point. Okay? All right. How you will be graded. This is essentially a take-home final exam. So rough draft is due week 14. So in 2 weeks, and the final is due the last day of class. Okay? This is essentially a take-home exam whose sole purpose is to demonstrate both that you understand the above concept and that you develop the skills necessary for correctly applying them. Keep this firmly in mind. It's not about whether you liked or whether we're moved by the documentary, though such impact is important for your analysis of how successful it was in its aims. Nor is this exam about the subject matter of the documentary, what happens in it, its plot, etc. So I don't really care if it moved you. I mean, I kind of want to know, I'm interested, but I'm not grading you. You're not writing about how this part moved you and this part moved you. You're more like doing like a cold analysis of it, right? And I don't really care about the plot, right? I don't want you to take your time and tell me, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, right? That's not the idea here. I only care about these things insofar as they demonstrate how the documentary tries to persuade its audience. So I want you to think about only two things. Number one, the tools the filmmaker is using to persuade you, right? So just like we did this with the commercials, right? What is the filmmaker doing to try to convince you? Logos, pathos, ethos, right? What is the filmmaker doing for reason? What is he doing emotionally? What is he doing to get credibility with you? And then that persuasion's shortcomings, right? Mostly whether it's attempts at persuasion have logical flaws. So lack of appropriate evidence, poorly structured arguments, questionable experts that are not really experts, rhetorical distractions that mask the truth, logical fallacies, etc. I'm going to give you guys very specific. Here's what I want you to do. Okay. But I also want you to note, though this is much lesser importance and belongs only in your conclusion, whether there are uses of ethos or pathos that would have helped the filmmaker better achieve his or her purpose. So you're looking for the shortcomings, and you're also essentially potentially suggesting ways that the film could have done this better. Keep your attention focused on the instructions, which ask you many very specific questions. The easiest way to do poorly in every part of this final is not to pay close attention to the questions and end up writing on the general topic instead. Okay? This may be the most common way people lose points in this assignment. Remember, this is a final, and I'm looking to verify you can understand these directions and provide me with everything I'm specifically asking you for. Towards that end, your writing should be clear, precise, analytic. This will be much more likely to help keep you focused on a specific task at hand and avoid passionate distractions. And passionate distractions really happen a lot in this assignment, where people will choose a topic that they really care about, and then they'll just go off on all the things they really care about instead of kind of focus on analyzing the documentary. Make sure you do not plagiarize in any way or form, including copying the film's description from anywhere like IMDb, right? See the academic honesty section of the syllabus for more information. Finally, make sure you meet the word requirement, right? You'll get a penalty of 30 if you don't. Okay? So your samples are in template format, which means they're in the same format that you're doing to do your midterm. This semester, we're switching for the first time. We're going to start you guys as a template, and then you're going to just take everything from the template and make it into an essay. We kind of originally started as an essay and then went to a template format. And now we're kind of moving to start with a template, then move to your final submission. So this is what your final submission is going to look like, right? The red part is essentially telling you what every part should be. Okay? Let me see if we're going to start with the template here. Okay? So you're going to do the template, and essentially they have the same thing. The template is just there to make sure that it's easier for you to see, to make sure that you do everything. Because when originally I assigned these kind of things just as an essay, people tended to skip a lot of things. I put it as a template and they stopped skipping a lot of things. Okay? So here's what you're going to be asked for. Again, Will, since you missed this part, day 14, so in 2 weeks, you're going to come in with your rough draft. Okay? You get 50 points if your rough draft is full, 25 if it's partial. Okay? And your rough draft is going to be in a template form. Your final is going to be in an essay form. Okay. Okay, so you're going to put your name, your documentary, who directed this documentary. And the first part is going to be all about context, right? Tell us what is the topic of the film. So Brody, I'm going to use Blackfish as my example, which is one of the reasons why I don't let people do it anymore. So think of Blackfish, right? The topic is essentially the dangerous use and abuse of orcas by SeaWorld and other theme parks. Okay? That's the topic. So notice the ideas. Tell us about the topic, not the filmmaker's position. Don't tell us about the plot. Tell us about the topic. So you're going to do essentially a fairly short background research about the topic. It's asking you for 4 sources. Okay? So if the topic is about the treatment of orcas by places like SeaWorld, that's what you want to do essentially a little bit of research on, right? How are orcas treated at SeaWorld? The idea is that you have some background information on the topic before you see the documentary. All right, be sure to include a works cited page in this. So the works cited page can just go down here after you told us about the topic. Okay? And then what do you think most people would have thought about this topic when the movie was made? For example, Blackfish. I think when Blackfish was made, most people thought that there was nothing wrong with the way SeaWorld was operating. Most people never would have given this topic any thought. I sure didn't. Right? So why did the filmmaker make this film? And this part is very important, what are they trying to persuade you of? Right? So in this case, the filmmaker essentially made the film in order to make people aware of this issue and in order to hopefully get places like SeaWorld not to maintain orcas anymore, to get them to free their orcas. Right? Okay, then you get to the film's arguments, right? The idea here is you're going to find the central argument of the film, not the conclusion. The conclusion is, let's say, SeaWorld should no longer use orcas for entertainment. Okay? But the actual argument, so you're going to write it in standard form. For example, the argument would be P1. The orcas used by places like SeaWorld are driven mentally insane by their treatment. P2, the orcas in places like SeaWorld are dangerous to their trainers. P3, if you have an animal that is being driven mentally insane by its treatment and is dangerous for its trainers, then it should not be held in captivity. So conclusion, SeaWorld should not hold orcas in captivity. Right? You see how that's like the central argument? And Brody, well, does that make sense, guys? Shuwei, are you able to turn your camera back on? Or was it freezing before?
Okay.
Right. Okay, so that's your first part. You're writing in standard form, and then you're writing about what further evidence is giving for these central claims. So the central claims I just gave you, right, is one of them was that SeaWorld and other aquatic parks drive orcas insane, right? What evidence does the film actually give for this? Okay, so now you're looking for the rest of the evidence, right? You're explaining what that evidence is. And what about that other part? What evidence does it give that orcas are dangerous to their trainers? Okay, so you're going to put all those evidence in there, okay? And you're going to be clear what's the point, right? So it showed that this orca essentially killed its trainer, and this is supporting how orcas are dangerous, right? And here's another instance where it killed a trainer, and here's another one, right? Okay, does this make sense so far, guys? Okay. Next time we meet, we're going to walk through this, by the way. So not next week, because next week we got Thanksgiving. But in the following week when we meet, we're going to look at a short documentary. We're going to look at a 15-minute documentary, and you guys are going to do a trial run. You're going to essentially fill this in for that documentary. Okay. Okay. Then your analysis of the argument. Do you think it's a good argument? Right? Is it convincing? Right? Make sure you consider both aspects that are convincing and things that are not convincing. And then what do you think would have made the argument stronger? You can always make an argument stronger. Documentaries are normally 90 minutes, but I mean, my wife is working on a documentary and it's gone down from 8 hours to 2 hours. It's like lots of things get left out in a documentary. Right? So there's always more evidence that could have been presented. Okay, then you're looking at the experts. Right? Documentaries almost always have experts, right, that are talking about what's going on. How did the film attempt to establish credibility with the audience? Now, credibility is not just experts. Credibility can also be, I'm like you, right? Anything that gets you to trust them. Examine the expertise of two people presented as quote unquote experts. They may or may not be experts. If you can, try to find one who truly is an expert and one who is not an expert on the topic. Be specific about what makes them an expert or not. Identify an inappropriate appeal to authority fallacy if applicable. Okay. And then what do you think would have made the film's ethos more effective? Usually this has to do with Do you think they could have brought in any more or better experts? Right? Nothing's an unacceptable answer. Of course, they could have brought in some sort of additional experts. All right, then we get the emotional appeals. So notice this is logos, ethos, pathos. So what is the filmmaker doing to emotionally influence the audience in order to persuade them to accept its message, right? And be specific about it. This is usually just the easiest part of the whole thing. What do you think would have made the film's use of pathos more effective? What else could have been done? And then lastly, rhetorical devices and logical fallacies. Identify at least 2 rhetorical devices or fallacies. So for your midterm, you needed 2 of each. This just says find 2. Okay? Other than repetition and downplayer. So I took those 2 out. Okay? So this could be any rhetorical device or any fallacy, psychological or common. Right? Explain them as specifically as you can. So for example, don't just tell me there's an unrepresentative sample or a straw person or a red herring. You want to explain what those fallacies are, right? And show specifically how these occur and explain why those are the fallacies and devices. Okay, so I'm looking for a specific explanation. Again, just like you're doing for your midterm. Okay, and then did the documentary use any slanted, leading, or loaded question? Right. So remember, we did this on day 8, right? Slanted questions. Documentaries a lot of times ask questions, right? And a lot of times what they do is they want a certain answer so they can get the clip they want. So a lot of times they ask slanted questions. So you're going to essentially look for any of those. If you can't find any slanted question, then you're looking for a 3rd rhetorical device or fallacy. And then finally, overall, what do you think? How convincing was all this? And be specific about it. Okay, so that's the final. Again, let me say, you're gonna week 14, you're filling out this template, right? We're gonna do the review this way. Week 15, you're essentially putting the same thing here. I mean, notice this is an essay form, but essentially you're going to take what you wrote here and just copy and paste it in there. And then make it so it flows like an essay. Does that make sense, guys? So you'll go like in the analysis of argument, whatever you have here, you're going to end up copying and paste it and put it here, right, under analysis of argument. And you're just going to, if you need to transition in your sentences, however it's going to be, right, you're just going to make it look like an essay. But your essay is broken down for exactly the same thing that your template is. With regards to the arguments themselves, by the way, there's to the instructions themselves. Do you guys have any questions about the instructions themselves? Okay, so far so good. Here are 3 samples, right? One is looking at the documentary West of Memphis. It's a particularly long one, but it's very good. This one is looking at Going Clear, Scientology in the Prison of Belief. And this one is Journey into the Rhino Horn War, a South African documentary. Okay, so take a look at these. These should help make sense of how it's supposed to be. And then it's you should be able to follow it from there along with the instructions. Okay, guys, so let's get to today's stuff. Again, we're going to come back to this next week. By next week, you definitely want to have a documentary. Sorry, but not next week. We're meeting the week after that. But I would pick a documentary as soon as you can. If you have any ideas, just go ahead and email it to me. And that'll be a fast way to kind of get them clear. Unless you're doing something from that list, in that case,